I have not made a video comparing automatic watches to quartz watches because I didn't think there was enough meat on the bone to justify it. Automatic vs mechanical. Sure, that's an easy one. That's been done 1,000 times. But when you get down to the two most common types of mechanical watches, a display case back costs more to make and it is slightly cheaper to manufacture a case back that has no cutout in it. Same goes for a lot of other brands out there. But at the end of the day, you can get a version of any of those models with a display case back if you want it. You'll usually find that the automatic will cost more, but I'm curious to know whether that's still true. I'm a watch nerd, so of course I want to see the movement and I also want to wind my watch, but I'm not the average person. I'm actually a little bit of an outlier. But again, I'm an outlier. What about you? Let me know in the comments below. I know what I want in a watch, but the average person doesn't. If you had to buy a brand new watch today, knowing what you know now, when we talk about the average person buying a watch, would you buy an automatic or quartz if you were buying a watch for someone else? Would you show them the movement or keep it hidden? I think that this is a really interesting question because if you're rebuying a watch for someone else, chances are you don't know as much about watches as the person you're buying it for. You could be way off the mark. So this question of what you would do versus what you would let them have is a really interesting one. We're usually talking about men buying women's watches, and I know that sounds weird, but hear me out. Most watches are bought by men, but most watches are bought for women. For example, take the best-selling watch in the world, the Apple Watch, which is bought mostly by men but is worn by women. Another example is something like the Casio G-Shock, which is bought by men but is often bought as a gift for a woman. These are just two examples. There are plenty more. Would you still buy an automatic or would you switch to quartz? Let me know in the comments below. For example, a Seiko SRPD55J1 costs $475, whereas the equivalent quartz version, the SRPC49J1, costs only $275. Or consider the Citizen Corso models. You can get a 42mm Corso with a regular movement for just $185. But to get a Corso with an automatic movement, you need to spend $345. That's almost double the price. The differences between them are so subtle and in some ways negligible that I just haven't had the heart to do it. But if that's the case, then why do we continue to pay extra for an automatic? The answer to that question is that most people still want an automatic simply because it is considered better than a quartz. Many people still believe that the sweeping second hand of a mechanical movement looks nicer and is more accurate than the ticking second hand of a quartz movement. This is actually not true. A quartz movement with its step-less sweeping second hand is more accurate than an automatic, but it's generally less accurate than an expensive Swiss-made automatic movement. And then I saw this article on Hodinkey that really changed my perspective about these watches. And since most watches are purchased by the average person, while quartz models do UNT because adding a date display to a quartz movement increases the manufacturing complexity and thus the price. Now, speaking of price, in general, an automatic movement will cost more to produce than a quartz movement. Not only does the automatic movement have more parts, but the manufacturing tolerances are tighter and the materials used are generally better. So it's more expensive to make. That means that overall, the finished product, i.e. the watch, will cost more as well. Most people will just go with an automatic, even though a quartz will be slightly more accurate. Interestingly, this is exactly how it was in the past before Ronda started making high-quality quartz movements in Switzerland. Back in the early days of quartz, the accuracy of these cheap Japanese quartz movements was great and they were unconsidered reliable enough for professional applications like a diver or a chronograph. Nowadays, if you get a reputable brand, you can expect much higher levels of accuracy from a quartz movement. Or at least it nudged me in the right direction for a video idea. It's called Are We All Just Too Hard on Quartz Watches? The author makes a really good point, which is that a lot of people who own an automatic watch also own a quartz watch, and they use the quartz for more daily beatings, because they do want to have to worry about winding it, or even if it gets jostled around a lot, it won't lose accuracy. They also tend to put away their automatics, perhaps in a safe deposit box where they only get worn every now and then, and as a result, those automatics may run less accurately than the quartz, because they aren't running constantly. Now that got me thinking, if you were buying a new watch today, knowing what you know now, which can be seen as more interesting and certainly more interesting to look at. In fact, I'd argue that movements are kind of the main point of interest for a lot of watch enthusiasts, myself included. So with the advent of display cases back in the 60s, this became very important to a lot of people. But for a lot of other people, the display case back isn't even important. And that's why we see many brands offer a no-frills quartz movement hidden under a plain case back, like the Explorer or Submariner of Rolex or the Tudor Black Bay line. Even Omega, whose entire brand identity is built on the moon landings and having one of the most famous movements ever made, sells a ton of quartz models without any sort of fancy exhibition case back. Would you still go automatic or would you choose quartz? Well, let's discuss that right after. It is fair to say that many people buy an automatic over a quartz because it has a mechanical movement. To be fair, the main reason why Rolex doesn't put a display case back on their base models is probably cost savings rather than design. So we know that a lot of people don't care about seeing the movement, but it turns out that the average person doesn't know that. Another thing that might drive sales of automatics over quartz is that a lot of entry-level automatics will have date displays if you're looking at similar models from different brands. So we know that many people want an automatic over a quartz because they believe it's better. Now, I personally would still buy an automatic. And here's the rub. And so, here's the question. For me, I'm all about educating people, so I would always show them the movement and let them know how cool it is. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.